Hello everybody and welcome back to Sweet and Sour Soccer. In today's video, of course, we're going to be speaking about the Championship playoffs. So we're supposed to be joined by my co-host James, but unfortunately he has lost his voice, so you're stuck with me today. And after my bang to the head, I'm looking a bit like a reject Harry Potter, but these four teams will be looking to add their own slice of magic to these playoffs, of course, and get up into the Premier League. I'm going to be speaking about my predictions. I'm going to predict who is going to actually end up in the Premier League, as well as predicting all the games in the playoffs, as well as talking about these guys' season so far. But guys, before I jump into the video, please do help us out. Hit that like button, and if you're new to the channel, please do subscribe as well. Got lots of great content coming up throughout the summer, transfers, predictions, you name it, it's all going to be on this channel, so please do subscribe. And let's jump in to speaking about the playoffs, because these four teams, for me, they all share one thing in common. They've really had to defy the odds to get into these playoffs one way or another. They've all got different stories, but of course, the fact that they're sat here in the playoffs is, merit to themselves already. Starting off with Huddersfield Town, 6 points was all that separated with them between relegation and staying up last season. They then were favourites, one of the favourites to go down this season. A lot of people were tipping them to actually go down to League One, but it looks like they could still be leaving this league, but it will be up rather than down, which shows how brilliant a season. They've really defied the odds, Huddersfield Town. And of course, they went much of 2022 unbeaten. It was actually mid-March where they lost their first game of the calendar year, and that did come against Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup. And talking of Nottingham Forest, started off the season 1 point from the first 7 games. That was, of course, until Steve Cooper took charge. He has really transformed that team, and yes, they have sadly missed out on that automatic promotion chase. So it looked towards the end of the season they might have just picked Bournemouth, but to be fair, it didn't happen. But the fact they are in the playoffs in general has been a massive, huge achievement for Nottingham Forest this season. Sheffield United, now obviously Sheffield United, they came down from the Premier League, of course. And, usually when you come down from the Premier League now, you do become favourites to inevitably go back up. Of course, something Fulham and Norwich know too well. But it wasn't easy signing for them. Obviously, Jukanovic, their previous manager, got let go after 22 games, I believe it was, and Sheffield United sat in 16th position at the time. Up stepped Paul Heckingbottom. He has really transformed Sheffield United, got them playing some really attractive, free-flowing football and coming into the playoffs in much confidence as well. And finally, probably the biggest underdogs of them all, Luton Town. Luton Town, they're, of course, looking to set history here, because if Luton Town do manage to win the playoffs, they will be defining and writing history. First team ever to go down from the top division all the way down to non-league and work their way all the way back up to the Premier League, should it happen. What an achievement that would be. And of course, they've been having a couple of stable seasons since going up from League One in the 18-19 season. They actually finished 19th 2 seasons ago, then 12th, and now have found themselves within the playoffs. Such a huge achievement, especially when you look at how many injury problems they have had. I mean, when you look at the season in general, I touched on the fact that Nottingham Forest towards the end were challenging, obviously promotion, automatic. Unfortunately, that loss to Bournemouth wrote that off. And then a disappointing result in their last fixture against Hull. They did obviously get a penalty in the very last minute, which looked to be basically the last kick of the game. It wasn't. Hull went up and scored the equaliser. So you're probably asking, how will they now go into the playoffs? You're hoping that, obviously, if you're a Forest fan, that the knock of not getting automatic promotion hasn't knocked them too much. But to be honest, if there's a manager that can get that team rallying, if there's a fan base that can get them rallying as well, it could be Nottingham Forest and fans. And of course, Steve Cooper, he's really changed that dynamic of the team. And I think he will prepare them well and get them back up and rallying for this playoff fight. Huddersfield Town, they've been on some fantastic form as well. And of course, they finish in 3rd position. The last minute equaliser for Hull actually was the difference for them, because when you look at Huddersfield's goal difference compared to that of Nottingham Forest, if Nottingham Forest would have hung on, of course Huddersfield would have gone finished in 4th place and would have come up against the Sheffield United team. It did change in the last couple of minutes, but of course it is now Huddersfield Town taking on Luton Town, and you've also got Forest taking on Sheffield United. Some big clubs in this playoff, and all will be hoping to make it to the Premier League, some of which haven't been in the Premier League for a very long time, looking at Nottingham Forest and Luton Town, of course. Nottingham Forest themselves will probably believe that their time has come this season, and it's about time that Nottingham Forest did return to the top flight, but it's not going to be an easy task at all. So guys, let's jump into these predictions, of course, and we start off with the first home game, Luton Town taking on Huddersfield Town. Now, Luton Town, fantastic form at home this season. In fact, Luton Town have only lost 4 games at home this season. And when you ask what happened in the head-to-head with these guys, in fact, when it was the home tie for Luton, they managed to get a draw against Huddersfield Town. Now, Huddersfield Town, they enter this in fantastic form, having won 4 straight wins and 7 without loss. And as I said, they've spent much of 2022 unbeaten. They only actually have lost, I think it's 3 games in 2022, and they are in some fantastic form. Some major injury problems for Luton towards the end of the season. Of course, the 7-0 defeat will ring true to those watching. But at that point, Luton had over 10 players injured and actually had to sign an emergency keeper on loan. For a team that has been very shoestring anyway, they've done absolutely amazing to be where they are. And thankfully for them, 3 of their key players returned on the last day of the season. Alan Campbell, Sonny Bradley, and of course Harry Cornick, all back in contention for the playoffs. And hopefully for them, they'll be able to add a couple more. It's rumoured that maybe another 1 or 2 might return from injury. Huddersfield Town, though, they've got a bit of an update when it comes to injury, another positive, because it looks like creative midfielder Lewis O'Brien is going to be back into contention for the playoffs. And of course, he has been fantastic this season. So this is going to be a massive plus in itself for Huddersfield Town. Now, when it comes to this home fixture, I've actually gone and predicted a 1-1 draw in this fixture. I think it's going to be very hard to beat Luton Town. And in fact, when they met actually in the season, in the regular season, this was the exact score that it was. And I think history will repeat itself. So in the first leg of this championship tie, I'm going to predict Luton Town and Huddersfield to draw. Now, let's talk about Sheffield United taking on Nottingham Forest. And of course, Sheffield United are going to start the tie at home. This is going to be a very close game in general, and a very close tie between the 2 teams. Of course, Sheffield United coming into this on some fantastic form. Forest, you've got to wonder what the defeat to Bournemouth has done. And then obviously the draw against Hull. Hopefully for them, they can uplift themselves for this. Interesting fact, obviously going into this, their head-to-heads in the league, they haven't been able to separate themselves. Both fixtures actually resulted in a 1-1 draw. And when you look at the injuries for Forest at the moment, Cook, Colback and Yates, all possible to make a return. Hopefully they do. They didn't feature in the last game of the season. Yates, of course, suffering an off-shoulder injury against Bournemouth. Steve Cook suffering a massive head injury, as well as obviously having a few personal issues that he's had to sort. But hopefully for Forest, all 3 of those players will be fit and returning. But we can't not talk about Sheffield United's injuries. Of course, they've been having to play a bit of an unconventional 2 up top. Player of the Year and Young Player of the Year for Sheffield United, Morgan Gibbs-White, has been playing up front in a 2 with, of course, Ndiaye, and that has formed a great partnership for them, both scoring on the last day of the season. But they'll be hopeful that maybe a couple of their players will return. Billy Sharp is a name that has been mentioned, of course, a bit of a hero in Sheffield United now. He's been playing for them for a long time. But McBurney, Brewster and a few others are still looking to be out, and some might not even make it back before the start of the next season. So in this one, I've actually said that it's going to be a 1-1 prediction. I've backed basically said it's going to be the same result as what happened in the league. I think we're going to see another 1-1 prediction, and of course it'll be all to play for when we go to Nottingham Forest. So then you look at Huddersfield coming in the reverse tie, taking on Luton Town. Now, interestingly, Huddersfield Town at home, they've only actually lost once at home in this calendar year. They'll be very confident. They're on some fantastic form, obviously, which I've already touched on. Luton Town, though, they're going to be so up for this. And you think if they can get some kind of result at home, maybe even if they could pull off a win, they're going to be so up for this. As I said, they're looking to write history. They've been so up against the odds all throughout the season. Such a paper-thin squad, plagued by injuries. They're not, I suppose they're used to fighting against the odds. And they're probably going to have to do it again if they are to win the playoffs. Huddersfield, though, have been extremely strong at home, and that's why I've gone for a Huddersfield 2-0 win, sadly, for Luton Town fans. And I am saying that obviously that means Huddersfield Town will make it to the playoff final 3-1 on aggregate. So we come on to Nottingham Forest now, taking on Sheffield United. And this is going to be an interesting tie in itself. Of course, Nottingham Forest, as I predicted, will be going into this tie with a 1-1 draw if my predictions are right. Hopefully, if they could pull off a good performance against Sheffield United, if you're a Forest fan, you're probably thinking, can we do it? Can we do it at our home ground? I'm going to jump straight into this prediction. I've said 1-1 again. I think history will repeat itself. We'll see two back-to-back 1-1s, much like the league, which will result the question of a 2-2 on aggregate. What will happen? And my prediction's going to be, sorry, Sheffield United, I'm going to predict Nottingham Forest to make it to the final, and I think it will happen through extra time. Could it go to penalties? That is the question. I think this is going to be a really close tie, and if people do have different predictions for me on any of these ties, I won't argue with them too much, but this one especially I think is going to be really close, and it could go either way. And as you could probably tell from predicting 2 1-1 draws, and saying Forest will get through on extra time, maybe I'm not fully convinced myself. But that would leave a Huddersfield Town versus Nottingham Forest before, obviously, per final. And this would be massive in itself. Now, Huddersfield and Forest, they've played each other twice in the league, of course, but also once in the FA Cup. When it comes to the league, they've actually got 1 win each, but Forest are currently 2-1 up when it comes to these games, because, of course, Forest did win in the FA Cup. So when it comes to knockout football, you could argue that Forest have had the upper hand on Huddersfield Town going into this playoffs. It's going to be interesting because both of these teams have been on superb form in the second half of the season. As I said, Huddersfield Town have really defied the odds. It did look like for one period, I think they lost the game against Nottingham Forest in the Cup. They went on back-to-back defeats in the league. It did maybe look like potentially things were starting to die off, but they regrouped and have been very strong since, picking up some really good results on the way. Nottingham Forest, of course, they finished the season absolutely fantastically, but the last 2 games, and I'm sure Steve Cooper will pick them back up. When it comes to this game, it's going to be a really interesting game. It could go either way. Of course, if this is the final, I think we're going to be in for a really great playoff final. There's going to be some really good football played. I think both teams will go for it. There won't be a fear factor. Yeah, and I think Wembley Stadium itself could be packed to the rims full of both Forest and Huddersfield Town supporters. I don't think either will have any problems selling out their allocation, to be honest, when it comes to a playoff final at Wembley. Who am I going to back in this, though? And to be honest, I've just got to go with my gut. I'm going to go for Huddersfield Town. I'm going to go for a 2-1 prediction for Huddersfield Town in the playoff final. Nottingham Forest fans, if you hate me at the moment, I am sorry. But I did predict you to go up automatic just 3 weeks ago, so it might not be a bad thing, but I am actually not predicting you to go up in this tie. I reckon it'll be Huddersfield Town, but will make it to the Premier League, and I do think it's going to be a really competitive playoff final and a really competitive playoffs either way. So guys, even if you don't agree with my predictions, if you do, let me know. It's always nice to know someone agrees. But if you don't, let me know your predictions in the comments. Let me know if you're one of these 4 teams, how confident you are. And if you're not one of these 4 teams, let me know who you reckon gets to the playoffs as well as a neutral. And as I said at the start of the video, if you have enjoyed it, please do hit that like button, and please do subscribe to the channel for more football content. And hopefully I'll see you on another video. Goodbye.